UPL is challenging the world's food systems, transforming tired and outdated conventions, creating a network for agriculture, feeding sustainable growth for all. No limits, no borders. Open Ag.
So hi, my name is Adrian Percy and I'm Chief Technology Officer at UPL. And today we're going to explore what is going on in the very exciting agtech sector with a group of individuals that represent the broad range of new technologies that growers can expect to see emerging on farms in the coming years. I'm really looking forward to picking their brains and hearing a lot about how new technology to support growers to farm more efficiently and more productively will arrive moving forward. Now, agtech refers to a movement that's only occurred relatively recently. There are now literally hundreds of early stage companies who are all vying to be the next big thing in agriculture with new technologies, new business models, and even new production systems. This movement only started less than a decade ago and has largely been driven by new investment coming from venture capitalists, of which we're lucky to have one with us today. Now, last year, there was over $3 billion in investment in these companies across a whole variety of different areas, including plant science, crop protection and input management, and precision ag. Now, these companies are located all over the globe, but they're all looking to serve farmers of all types of operations and in many different ways. So they're clearly breaking down barriers to bring new innovation to the marketplace, and it's going to be fun to explore how they see this sector evolving in the coming years. Now, we're going to move and meet our panel, and really we've got a whole ton of geographies covered today, either by their location or by the location of their companies. So we have companies from Israel, from Europe, from here in the United States, but also people talking to us from Canada, from all across the US, and also from France with Patrice. So let's get started. And first I want to introduce Ingrid, or more accurately, have Ingrid introduce herself. Ingrid is an investment director at Finisterre Ventures. And Ingrid, please tell us a little bit about Finisterre and your role there.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm an investment director with Finisterre Ventures. So we're an early stage ag tech VC fund. Been around since 2006, investing in the space, typically investing in Series A and beyond, and writing checks of around 3 to 6 million in our initial investments to into all of these ag tech startups that we look at. And I have been with the fund for about 5 years or so now, and I oversee most of our investments that touch the life sciences. So that's everything from crop inputs, plant sciences, all the way over to things in animal health. And that's because I'm a technically trained person. You know, I'm a plant molecular biologist by training who accidentally ended up on the finance side. So it's a ton of fun to see all these ag tech companies trying to bring science to bear in the market and help growers produce our food.
Thanks, Ingrid. And you are based in Toronto, right?
Yes, I am. I'm Canadian. You've outed me.
I think we could just about hear that accent. So thank you. So next, moving to Patrice, and Patrice, you're talking to us from France, but you're CEO of a company called Biotalis, which is a fantastic young early stage company. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Thank you, Adrian. Indeed, my name is Patrice Selles, and the company I'm leading today is based in Belgium, so in Europe, from the Flemish biotech center, where we still have quite a lot of bubbling biotechnologies happening in Europe. The company is quite fascinating. It's leveraging a platform that has been validated in the pharmaceutical industry to bring protein-based biocontrol into the hands of the growers. So we are not too old, indeed, as you said. We are just 7 years old, but we have submitted our first registration dossier for the very first biofungicide into the hands of the EPA in December 2020. And the company is growing. We are around 60 people now, based in the US as well, in North Carolina, as well as in Ghent, in Belgium. And moving forward to be able to fully leverage the platform across multiple indication, leveraging the technology for fungicides, also working on insecticide and bactericide solutions, which would allow for the first time to have a multi-indication biocontrol platform to further develop products moving forward.
Thanks, Patrice. And I've got to mention, Ghent again, where your company is based. I mean, many people don't know this small but very beautiful town in Belgium. But in fact, many of the GM traits which growers are used to using on their farms were actually discovered in that town, in that biotech community, right?
Absolutely. It's a vibrant green biotech area still, with a number of companies that are still residing on the campus. It's really, really nice.
Thank you. So now we're going to move back to North Carolina, but also a little bit via Israel with Doug Eisner and AgPlenus. Please, Doug, tell us a little bit about your role.
Thank you, Adrian. So I am located in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. AgPlenus is in Israel, and we work in traditional crop protection chemistry, but we take a new approach to that. So we use machine learning, AI to help us design molecules, design chemistry to go after novel MOAs. And that's kind of a core of our company, is we're trying to tackle the issue of resistant weeds specifically initially, which is a major problem for growers all over the world. And so our approach, by going after new methods of action and new modes of action, is to find chemistries that will be able to handle tough resistant weeds. And our research has in fact shown that. So we're a small but sophisticated company using machine learning, AI to design chemistry. And by way of background, I was a co-founder and chief operating officer of a company called Grassroots Biotechnology, which was spun out of Duke University. We had a deal with Monsanto, and then they acquired us. And that was a company in the ag biotech space, but in the GMO area.
Thanks, Doug. And again, I mean, I think, everyone's ears will prick up when you talk about resistance busting chemistry that's so needed in today's environment on the herbicide, insecticide, and fungicide front. So it will be good to explore a little bit about the progress you're making in those different areas. Last but not least, Bobby Vick, and Bobby is with a company called AgriPoint. And he complements our kind of cross-technology panel. We've heard from Patrice on the biological side. We've got Doug on the chemical side, but Bobby is working much more on the data and precision ag side. So, welcome, Bobby. Tell us a little bit about AgriPoint and your role there.
Thanks, Adrian. No, I'm glad to be a part of the group. I guess I would represent sort of the digital agriculture space. I am Vice President of Product Engineering and Services at AgriPoint. We are a Series B startup based out of Florida here in the United States. I'm actually in North Carolina in the RTP area myself as well. But we've been around for about 7 years, and really our focus, heavily remote sensing based, but is really connecting what I would call digital models to the real world. So we use an array of data collection techniques, all the way from terrestrial LiDAR, which is a laser-based system, to aerial sensors on drones and aircraft and satellites, for deriving very precise and granular plant scale models for both farmers as well as those in the agrochemical and genetic space. So we're leveraging a lot of models and decision-making techniques that connect this very granular information and these digital twins of literally at the plant level into actionable insights that our clients can use for their day-to-day operations.
Great, thanks, Bobby. And again, let's get into that in a bit more detail as we go, further into this panel. But I want to come back to Ingrid, to kind of kick things off, because, as I mentioned before, over $3 billion in early stage funding and ag tech last year. This has been an explosion in investment that we've needed for so long in agriculture. It's very exciting. But from an investor perspective, I'm just curious, I mean, what is the attraction in agriculture, and why do you think that we've seen this kind of uptick in investment over the last few years?
Well, I think for starters, you're starting to see an intergenerational change and interest in understanding where our food comes from, right? So one large market trend, macro trend that we've seen is the increase, buying power and influence of people my age, millennials coming to take over both in terms of, workforce participation, as well as becoming the dominant, consumer power when it comes to dollars to spend. And as people my age, start to become the most impactful consumers, we're also making different demands on, our food system, and different demands for the way our food is being produced. And coinciding with that, investors are starting to see the opportunity to kind of move the needle forward and change the way things are done in food and agriculture, both because there are consumers demanding that things change, but also because there's a lot of technologies that can now be reduced to practice and applied in agriculture. And so I actually joined the industry probably about 10 years back, just as all of this was taking off as a relatively new grad. And, it was a very exciting space to be. It seemed, one, very impactful to invest in terms of, benefits in the long run globally. And the second piece of that, was that it was relative white space when it came to investment. So Finisterre has been around since 2006 investing in the sector, but when we started out, there were very few funds in the space. And over the last, decade and a half, really the sector has exploded in terms of investment interest. And, it is partially because of the consumer interest, but also because there's increasing later stage investor interest and LP interest in applying sustainability metrics to their investment practices as well. So there's increasing dollars focusing on sustainability and increasing awareness of agriculture as a tool to reach some of the sustainability and climate proofing, climate change goals that the broader investment industry is becoming more aware, attuned, and interested in.
So fascinating answers. So even though clearly growers need, new technology and always have done to help their operations, make them more efficient and more productive on the farm, actually a lot of the push behind the investment has actually come, you feel, from the consumer side, and also from, maybe indirectly on this desire really to, increase sustainability practices on the farm as well.
Yeah, I think, the rise of venture capital, particularly the asset class that I invest out of, has a lot to do with the consumer interest. I would say historically investment in the space has primarily been large corporates and companies that are operating in the sector, looking to service their customers. And now you're starting to get investment interest because the average layperson is more aware of the agri-food ecosystem being very impactful to the future of, our population, our society. And so yeah, I would certainly say investor interest from a venture perspective has largely been driven by consumer changes and changes in consumer preferences.
Fantastic. And that's a lovely segue to Patrice, who's working, in truly, a new area, biologicals, sustainable agricultural practices. And I guess, that kind of approach has really been driven by a whole host of different forces, Patrice, consumer, but also food chain, but also growers themselves wanting to invest in these types of technologies moving forward.
Absolutely. And it's not new. So biologicals have been used for 100 years, a century. When I was young, as just Ingrid mentioned, 100 years of biocontrols, with BT being the first one being used as an insecticide in the fields and in multiple places in the world. So it's well known that this new technology can come and compensate for what's in the field today. But as Ingrid mentioned, I think the key drivers, what has changed over the last 15 years, of course, is the consumer demand. Wealthier people wanted to have their choice in terms of for example, the fruits and vegetables they want to have, healthy, nutritious, but also safe from a perspective of what is being used to produce them. That's one key element to drive the change in agriculture. The second one, as well, is the regulation all over the world. So throughout the last couple of decades, there have been quite a number of chemical pesticides that have been taken away from the toolbox of the growers. Good or bad, it's not mine to say, but what the results of that is that growers are left sometimes with a lack of tools to be able to combat the type of pest, fungicide, insecticide, bactericide are definitely lacking. So when these new biocontrol options are becoming available, they are a good way to complement what is existing today, and also to bring, as we can discuss further, some new mode of action to be able to compensate for what the chemicals, for the gap left by the chemicals disappearing. And the third one, I think, is also the technology development. Ingrid mentioned that a little bit as well. Over the last let's say, three decades, genome being, it's not a question anymore. You can make an analysis of a genome for a penny. I'm just making it up, but you know what I mean. So that's one element. The second element is also the development of technology like synthetic biology, getting access to fermentation practice, genome engineering, and a number of other things that were not accessible before, which are opening the door to a number of these technologies that can really get now accessible for the growers, for multiple applications, of course, but for the growers to be able, again, to complement their existing tools and to displace them when it makes sense and create more value for them as well.
Fantastic. I mean, Biotalis is clearly, a great representative in a very broad sector of new biological-based approaches and companies that are bringing those products to the market. But crop protection chemistry isn't going away either. So there's obviously still a lot of room and a lot of need for new approaches. And we already mentioned, resistance busting being one of them. But Doug, you are working in the more conventional area, I guess you would say, on this panel, but you're trying to do things in a completely different way. So, how can approaches like artificial intelligence help us to find new types of chemicals and which are useful to growers, and what type of products do you feel that you through Ag Planners can help bring to the market in the coming years?
Yeah, so Adrian, as you say, crop protection chemistry is not going away. Of the $70 billion crop protection market, it still represents the majority of that. Certainly in the herbicide space, the $32 billion herbicide space, most of that is chemistry. So our goal, and currently the ways that those new chemistries are discovered are the traditional spray and pray approach. So companies, they take their physical chemistry and they test them on models and they see what works, and then they try and elucidate the MOA from that. Our approach is completely different. So rather than kind of work backwards, we work forwards from the beginning. So we find a biological system within a pest that we want to interfere with. Then we identify a protein in that system, which is our target, and then we design chemistry for that target. And so we only look at targets that are novel MOAs, hopefully to handle the resistance issues. So MOAs that are not in existence in current crops, but then we employ artificial intelligence and machine learning to that discovery of new chemistries and the optimization of that. So one of the core assets of our company is this enormous database, virtual chemistry, 3 billion molecules. So however many physical compounds a large company like BASF can spray on their crops, we can look at many more virtually in this $3 billion molecule database. And all of those compounds in there are synthesizable per our mandate. And so we can then find chemistries by screening and then optimize those using artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so the results have been quite effective for us. We just announced a lead molecule, which is a new herbicide, a totally new MOA herbicide, which has a broad spectrum effect. It's corn and wheat tolerant. And we have a very robust pipeline behind our lead, which are all the result of this new platform that we have put into place.
Great, thank you, Doug. And last but not least, the third bucket of technology that we wanted to talk about today was the digital space. And as you said, Bobby, you're kind of the representative, at least on this panel for that. The emergence of precision ag over the past few years has been absolutely astounding. And it really feels to me like there's a kind of digital revolution going on the farm. And of course, that's not just on the farm, but in so many different facets of our daily lives. Digitalization is really changing the way we live and play and have fun. But in terms of digital agriculture, what do you see as the possibilities here? And can you kind of project forward to what the smart farm of the future may even look like?
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic question, Adrian. And we're surrounded by digital in every aspect of our lives today. I guess particularly in the COVID-19 era. But really, the beauty of digital agriculture is how much information that farmers have in the palm of their hand today. I'd say that the challenge of digital agriculture is the exact same thing. In the palm of our hand, we have more information at our disposal at any given time than farmers generations ago would have had in a lifetime. The challenge that companies like AgriPoint and others in this space face is how do we help our users synthesize that information and actually turn it into something that's valuable. And we really have taken an approach at AgriPoint of using the digital models that we derive at literally the plant scale to help teams like the others that are represented here on the call from an R&D space to be able to make high fidelity decisions about new chemistries that they're coming out with, or new genetics they're coming out with, or farmers in the field to be able to make real-time management decisions based on information that's coming back in from data that's been collected, from a drone or from a satellite that's passing over. And so I think the challenge that the beauty is there are increasing data streams coming into accessibility every day, whether it's satellite imagery that's available on a daily basis, or a drone that a farmer can launch that autonomously flies over their field and collects all of this information. And there are so many companies now that are working on collaboratively, how do we fuse these data streams together and then apply some of the same techniques that Doug's talking about at the molecular scale, we're applying it at the field scale. So how do we train, for example, machine learning models to be able to detect disease detection at an earlier stage? Or how do we help a researcher make a decision about subtle differences between different treatments that are being applied in a field setting earlier? Because we all know that so much of the investment and the cost is the time that it takes to get new products from sort of concept to the lab scale to the field to the consumer. So really our focus is on being able to validate those systems along the way, but also shorten that life cycle of taking something from the concept phase to something that actually can be introduced to the market.
It sounds to me from what you're saying, Bobby, that generating the data and capturing the data is no longer the issue. We have plenty of ways of doing that. It's actually integrating the data and then presenting it to a grower in a way that's meaningful, that they can extract value and make decisions from. That's really the kind of next frontier. Would that be correct?
Absolutely, and I would say it's also taking a lot of that decision power to the field edge. So many technologies are cloud-based today and leverage the power of the cloud. But one of the challenges we faced in a lot of our agronomic environments is a lack of connectivity. That's getting better, but the reality is that we don't always have access to some of the powerful cloud-based tools that are out there. So there's a lot of emphasis on edge computing and how do we take this information that's available and not just literally have it available in sort of this lofty cloud setting that may not be accessible, but truly bringing that back to the field edge as well, or to the equipment that the farmers are using in the fields.
Thank you. So Ingrid, coming back to you, I don't know if you feel like you've just had a pitch day, and I'm certainly not going to ask you which of the companies you would love to invest in, but I am curious, when you put your investor hat on again and look, not just at these companies and the sectors that they represent, I mean, what kind of technologies do you feel are really exciting, and what do you see as kind of transformational type technologies, in a general sense, that farmers may see coming to their farm in the not so distant future?
Yeah, I mean, Adrian, you and I have had conversations about this before. I absolutely agree with Doug that traditional crop chemistry isn't going away, but we need to be a little bit smarter and wiser about when and where to use them, right? And I think that's where technologies like what AgriPoint is doing, what some of the work that John Deere and Green Eye are doing in terms of spot application and reduction of overall use. That's really exciting because that allows us to reintegrate some of the traditional crop chemistries that are out there back into new use cases that are maybe a little bit more responsible in terms of how we're using these chemistries in field. So that's super exciting. I'm still, as very excited about traditional crop chemistry. I think when it comes to a venture perspective and all of our excitement about going after biologicals over the last decade and investments, we may have underinvested or under examined crop chemistry discovery as an investment vertical to invest in. So super excited to kind of look at life sciences technologies that have been developed through the pharmaceutical industry and see how they can be smartly applied in ag to, do all the things that we need to do in field. I think Patrice, being at Biotalis, working on biological based crop protection is also really important. And these are examples of taking life sciences technologies that have been developed and de-risked in the pharmaceutical and life sciences industries for human health and applying them in ag. So certainly think the intersection of those two are really interesting. And then one of our portfolio companies actually is looking at ways to use closed loop and identity preservation to I believe the term that they use is to harmonize incentives across the value chain. So price really for value and practice and quality being developed by their technology. The company is called Zcal. And I think models like that are really, really interesting because oftentimes we had discussions within ag tech as investors around, really what is the value prop of more sustainable practices if you can't price for that beyond, organic or beyond some relatively simple terms. And what's emerging in the nexus of digital ag applications as well as life science and sustainable applications as a business model that could be really interesting within our sector is identity preservation and pricing for quality instead of volume, which I think could be really game changing and interesting for growers.
Yes, I mean, you described well, the dilemma that I think the venture capital world has on, which companies to invest in and for what reasons. And, one thing you said earlier, Ingrid, traditionally a lot of this new technology development has come from the multinational corporations. And they, of course, are still playing, a big, big role in developing new chemistry and new biologicals and new traits and new precision ag approaches. But clearly the sector has changed with the advent of all of these early stage companies and the investment that VC has put behind it. I mean, I'm representing obviously UPL, which is a company that believes fervently in open innovation. So we are delighted to see, the emergence of all these companies that we hope to partner with in the future. But I'm curious on the panel, I mean, how do you see, the role of these larger corporations and how do you look to interact with them, if at all, moving forward? So maybe Patrice, you're smiling. I'm going to kind of pick on you here.
I can start. Well, unless you completely change the business model and can circumvent the 6 major ag players today that represent 75% of the global, market that we were discussing about, it's better to work together with them. And in this approach, I think Doug certainly will tell you more about that, is that we have a certain amount of tools. I mean, as I said before, Biotalis is a 60 people company. There are 5,000 people that are working in any R&D of these major ag companies that can be of tremendous support for a company of our size to be able to further develop the innovation that we have. We have a core that we really master, but there are a number of other people that could be very helpful and other complementing capabilities that will be helpful in our way to bring to the growers the best potential of our technology. So all these elements coming together, I think the best approach is to work together with these companies to demonstrate the value, and Ingrid mentioned the value proposition, that it is different and complementing what they are doing, and then hoping to have a real collaborative approach to bringing a product on the market or to developing a product de novo, demonstrating the value of the technology for something they cannot reach with their chemical or GM approaches in that front. So that would be, let's say, from a Biotalis perspective, the complementarity and collaborative approach.
And would that be the same, Doug, for
yeah, I would just kind of mirror what Patrice is saying. So the market is really dominated, as we know, by I guess it's an oligopoly in terms of the big companies that you're required to work through them in order to get your products into the hands of farmers. It costs $300 million, maybe 12 years to get a chemistry into the field, into the tank that a farmer will use to spray. And so companies like, we're smaller than you, Patrice, but AgPlenus, we have great technology, but we need to partner with larger companies. That being said, I will say that I think that small companies are where the innovation occurs. I can see it from my first company, Grassroots Biotechnology. We were focused on expression elements for genes that Monsanto put into their crops. And they had their own program there that was more people, it was bigger than our program, there was more money, but they came to us because we did it better. And we were more innovative. And I think you'll find that in any industry. You watch Google, they find technologies, they find the best. So our goal at AgPlenus is to be among the best to use AI. So I just saw that Syngenta made a deal with Insilica Medicine to take their AI platform and use it for crop chemistry discovery. It shows you the need for large companies to move outside. I think there is something about the incentive structure of a small company that just spurs creativity. Yeah. And AgPlenus will be among those companies that's producing some of the top work. We can move very quickly. We can work with partners all over the world very easily. And we have wonderful technology that we hope will be attractive to other companies. Yeah. But I'm a fan of the small company innovation. It's been around, and I think it will stay around. I'm sure, Ingrid, you know, the investment thesis kind of mirrors that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think our bet is that, you know, ag will take a pharma-like approach to, you know, outsourcing or insourcing innovation that, you know, really complements, you know, what they are good at in-house, and which is regulatory distribution and having a large, you know, staff of boots on the ground that can get these products out on field and educate growers as to, you know, what tools are available. Certainly as a venture investor, building out an entire sales and marketing team is, you know, not probably what we would want to finance and back, and it would be very difficult to drive returns from that perspective. So I think investors are aligned in that, you know, we do expect startups to work with large companies. And we do expect, you know, essentially dovetailing of innovation into existing infrastructure. But we're always on the lookout for, you know, potentially new and disruptive, you know, companies that could come up and, you know, potentially displace one of these, you know, monopolies or oligopolies, and have, you know, another place at the table. I think that's, you know, that kind of jostling is healthy for the industry. It increases competition, and hoping to see more of that as the sector continues to mature, and as we're starting to see, you know, later stage capital become interested in investing in this sector. There's potential to invest in companies beyond that Series C, Series D round, and watch them grow.
Yeah, I think we could have a very long debate on where innovation and technology development best sits. And certainly I would agree with Doug that in the smaller companies, they're far more agile. And within their kind of selected areas of expertise, like Patrice said, you know, can be very, very effective. But you know, there's probably a place for everybody. And what I think is exciting to me is having seen the industry, the ag chem industry, going through a consolidation relatively recently. At the same time, there's been an explosion of smaller companies that are kind of filling the gap, if you like, and making sure that there is a lot of innovation being developed, you know, for the farm. And to that point, and I'm going to bring in Bobby here maybe, you know, when we start to look at you know, the role of the grower in developing, you know, this innovation, we've not talked to much yet about how they should be involved. I mean, can you maybe say a few words from your perspective, how you involve farmers in your operations, and make sure, for instance, that you're developing technologies which are really user friendly and relevant to them?
Of course. You know, I think the grower is so important, in regardless of where you are in sort of the ag tech space today, because they are the ultimate consumer of the product that we're generating. And even in our case, where we work a lot of times with the same multinational corporations that you're referring to, and a lot of times in the R&D part of the process, even so, I think ag, and to its credit, has traditionally been very grower centric in terms of the products that we are developing. And it's important for us to know that the tools and the technologies that we are developing can actually have application at the field scale. And so even if we're working with an R&D client, it's important that we have the focus of understanding, you know, what are the pain points, what are the challenges that growers are actually facing today. There's been a lot of technology, I'll be the first to admit, and I'm part of the space that has overpromised and underdelivered. And a lot of times has been, here's a solution looking for a problem. We've taken a reverse approach to that. We try to spend times with the customers that we're working with to truly understand, regardless of the region they're in, the crop that they're working with, really where the low-hanging fruit is. What are the gaps and what are the value adds that you need today? And then that's where we focus our attention in our technology development, so that we are making sure that it's directed at a specific problem and a specific challenge point, versus just taking some of the broad scale technologies that we know have application, but maybe don't present the immediate value that I think is important when you think about it specifically from the grower perspective.
And maybe Patrice, bring you in here as well, because I guess with, at least with certain types of biologicals, there are, perhaps different things that growers need to do, to make sure that they're working consistently and in the right way. I mean, how are you guys at Biotalis thinking of incorporating kind of farmer input into your product development?
So first, we look at that from a farmer perspective, but also from a food value chain perspective. There are two components there, Adrian. The first one is that we look at complementing the growers' need. We are not reinventing the wheel at any point in time. We realize that growers have made substantial investments in their spraying capabilities, in the way they spray the field. And I think someone mentioned before that the time is the essence. So if we are putting additional, let's say, challenges in the hands of the growers together with the products we deliver to them, that ain't going to work. And so the way we are looking at that is to say, how do we bring to the growers something that is as close as a chemical in terms of usability, easiness to spray, and basically using the same type of equipment, while still focusing on the fact that this is going to be a biological with a different offer, and hopefully meeting the farmer practices. And we look at that from an integrated pest management program. The growers are not using just one chemical at a time. They put multiple things in a tank. They want to go as fast as possible. They want to protect their workers. They want to make sure that they can go back in the field as rapidly as possible. So we try to address these points so that they can have the most efficient operations as they can. So that's the money they can get. And then from an integration perspective is that what is the value they're going to get for the fruits, vegetables, where we are looking at for now with Biotalis, and how can we enhance this value by creating something different that is existing? So offering, for example, a variability of spray so that you can spray just before harvest and still have the opportunity to get the fruits, the high quality fruits, less chemical residues, and a longer shelf life, for example. And that could create more value for the growers. And some people downstream the value chain might be very happy to pay for this additional value. So there are these two components on the farm and after the farm that we are looking at to basically expose the technology at multiple points in the food production systems.
Thank you. You guys have been a fantastic panel. I really appreciate kind of getting these different perspectives from different technologies, different geographies, different places in the investment and the investee group. I'm going to kind of put you on the spot with the last question, which is kind of, I guess, a Twitter moment, but just ask you each, maybe in 3 words or less, describe to us what you see these different technology approaches, either from your companies or more in general, meaning, to growers and to the farm of the future. And maybe, Bobby, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, it's challenging to parse it down to 3 words, but if you hold me to it, I'd say connected, sustainable, and validated. And I think the last one's really important as we think about the consumer awareness of where their food and vegetable or food comes from today, and unfortunately some concerns around some of the new technology that is out there. I think there's a certain validation of technology and the approaches that companies like ours are using that we see being important going forward in the farm of the future.
Thank you. Doug?
Effective, productive, and sustainable.
Patrice?
Again, look, 3 words for a Frenchman, it's not going to work.
Everyone's doing more than 3 words here.
So living sustainable, because it has been said, I would say compose, don't oppose. The rationale is that I'm looking at the panel today, and there is a unique opportunity with our 3 diverse array of technology to compose something different for the growers offer in the future, just with what you have on the panel today. And I think that's what I'm looking for, is this collaborative approach between smaller players to be able to, as Ingrid mentioned, displace some of the existing ones, but that has to come from this collaborative approach. And I think you've got a great example today.
Well, I'm glad you didn't say sustainable, because if you had have done, I would have asked you all to define it, and I would have seen if you'd all had given me the same answer. but last, certainly but not least, Ingrid, your three.
Yeah, I mean, I am going to say sustainability, profitability, and efficacy, right? So, the things that we need to happen, we need things to be, both environmentally sustainable. Profitability means economic sustainability for growers, meaning, they can continue to do what they do for us producing our food every day. And then, efficacy means that they can, do it well, right? And that's what really our technology should be focusing on doing. So yeah.
Fantastic way to finish up. So on behalf of myself and UPL and all the team that are behind this, a big thank you for your time and all these insights that you've provided us in this really exciting sector. Thanks so much.